Finally, the card marks have come back to your ear holes. Did I just hear ear holes come out of my mouth and regret it? A little bit, but I'm going to stand by it like a false accusation. Thank you for sticking with us during the mid-season break. I know it was the longest week of your life. Nevertheless, I'm sitting here with my good friend Justice Williams. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am trying to make it and making it regardless.
Awesome.
I don't know if that made sense, but here we are. So, Justice, do you know the last thing we did together, what possible show we could have seen before our mini hiatus? Can you inform the people of that?
My friend and I, Kieran, we went to go see, what was it called? Battle of the Belts, I believe?
We went and saw Battle of the Belts 2 along with Rampage. They taped Rampage first. I've seen the most dark matches I've ever seen in my life. I believe the dark matches outran the entire TV broadcast, but we saw them tape Rampage live, and then we watched Battle of the Belts early. What did you make of that show, Justice?
I had a very, very good time while I was there. I showed up late, of course. So the first match on the card that I was able to see when I got there was the main event of Hangman Page versus Adam Cole for the AEW World Championship in the Texas Death Match. Boy, howdy, that was a great way to kick it off.
We were witness to blasphemy, and genuinely, and I know that this might sound just a little bit homery because my dude's from Texas, but I cannot decide between that match or, believe it or not, a dark match between Isaiah Sir Scott, Keith Lee, and the Nightmare Factory. It was a tag team. And I know that sounds really ridiculous to think the Nightmare Factory could take match of the night over for me from Adam Cole and Adam Page. But by gum, Swerve and Keith Lee are that good. And they had him on Dark, which I understand because they had him on Dynamite the previous Wednesday. But still, I want him on TV.
So that was one thing that Kieran and I were concerned about going into this. Basically, we're big fans of Keith Lee. So when we found out the AEW was coming to Texas, to our area specifically, and Keith Lee being on the roster, we assumed, okay, Keith Lee has to be on this card, right? And so throughout the last few weeks, we had been wondering and hoping and then being conflicted and feeling like, oh, maybe he won't be because of the card that we, got on AEW and Dark and Elevation. And lo and behold, we got to see Keith Lee wrestle with Swerve Strickland and in a tag match.
I said Swerve Scott, huh?
Yes.
I just realized that. Yes, Swerve Strickland. My apologies.
Yeah, Swerve Strickland, aka Swerve Scott, aka Killshot, aka Isaiah. And so it was very, very cool for us to see that because that was something that we that was seemingly the selling point for us, was like, we get to see beyond the death match. We get to see Keith Lee in Texas. Oh my God, that's so much fun. Just as a shout out. So we got to see the former Vanessa Bourne, Danielle Kamela, and Marina Shafir wrestle.
It's probably the most stacked dark cards I've ever seen because the way they shingled it is going to be the way I describe it. Is we had an hour of dark before Rampage, we had an hour of dark after Rampage, we had Battle of the Belts 2, and then we had another hour of dark.
Yes.
Just to put the schedule in context.
There's a lot of wrestling, and it was kind of hard to keep track every once in a while. Just had to look at the Titantrons to kind of figure out which was which. But yeah, we got to see those two wrestle, Danielle and Marina Shafir. And the reason I point that out is it's cool for me is because I quite like Marina Shafir in terms of her wrestling ability. So yeah, I very much hope that we get to see more of them on AEW Dark as well, and Dynamite and Rampage and all that stuff.
Yeah, the sad part about it is there are plenty of women's matches in AEW. They just all happen on Dark, which isn't the best PR look because you could just put those women's matches on TV there, TK. But I digress. One thing that I did enjoy about that card is we did get to see complete blasphemy on Good Friday. Did you ever think about that?
Yeah,
we saw that live. It was actually really fun.
Yeah, we apparently there was some news stirring, given that it was Good Friday, and then a specific choice that Hangman made during his match with Adam Cole with the crown of thorns, I guess, of the barbed wire, and yeah, apparently that caused a stir. But Kieran and I personally both felt like I'm here for it. We like that kind of craziness. We're full with that. It was just a great spot. I just recently watched an interview that Hangman did after the match, the death match, with Chris Van Vliet.
Yeah.
And he was talking about it. And I will say from our angle that we were sitting, that spot that went through the table, that did look crazy from our end. But then when Hangman described it as basically like, yeah, I'm taking this whole bump without knee pads, that added another layer of context to be like, oh, yeah, that hurt them both. Because after that happened, you and I both were looking at Cole like, is he okay?
Oh, my man was either selling really well or he was actually hurt, but I'm gonna guess it was a mixture of both because genuinely they had everybody come down, and that's a part of the theatrics, of course. But this man's landed on his friggin' head, right on the bean, man. And so, other notable matches on the night. Unfortunately, Justice did not get to see the Blackpool Combat Club versus the Ass Boys. It was a lot of fun, but it was a foregone conclusion. And Wheeler Yuta rolled up one of the most, I wouldn't say legendary people, but he's one of the most known, and he's had one of the most known gimmicks, and he's a bigger name in professional wrestling. And Wheeler Yuta, for all intents and purposes, got a clean victory over him. There was also the Ruby Soho qualifying match against, again, a foregone conclusion. And another foregone conclusion of the night was the Butcher beating a jobber in order to beef himself up for this past Wednesday's match with Wardlow, which was actually very fun. Ultimately, I think the best match on Battle of the Belts was Thunder Rosa versus Nyla Rose. Scorpio Sky and Sammy Guevara was very fun, but they worked me, Justice. They worked me into a shoe, brother.
Yeah, there was that was the results of that match were kind of let's say disappointing for us.
Battle of the Belts is a post-produced wrestling show, and I haven't gone back to watch it. I really need to, and I don't know if they tried to put in a few cheers, but Garland was not having Samuel Guevara. How many times have you heard a "one more time" chance for a backbreaker?
Yeah,
One of the most routine moves in wrestling, and we were begging him to do it again because we just hated that smirk-faced little I'm using my Looney Tunes voice now. Justice, interrupt me.
it wasn't even like a Roderick Strong backbreaker, like the Messiah of the backbreaker. It was just like, no, just break his back. That's just the attitude that they had for him. So yeah, that was the hatred. I was trying to deal with the hot dog fiasco at this current time because I was like, Sammy Guevara wrestling, great wrestler, but I'm gonna go get and fix this hot dog situation because I think someone owes me money or a hot dog. And so I just went out and did that. And by the time I came back, they had went to the finish. That was not necessarily the results we were both expecting, but look, it's wrestling. I said that's the
Penis shenanigans.
and it seems like, having watched the recent AEW, it seems like they're kind of leaning into that with Sammy, where it's kind of like, yeah, you guys don't like it's. It feels in a way similar to, and gosh, this is a weird comparison I'm going to make, 90s HBK in a sense.
It's that sort of hybrid dynamic with what I feel they wanted to do with Cody Rhodes. They wanted him to be so diluted that he was a babyface, but he's genuinely a heel. And so I think that's just, they transferred it over to Sammy. And it worked because screw that guy. I'm not trying to get demonetized. Another match that was really cool for me to see because I've never seen any sort of Ring of Honor live was Jonathan Gresham versus Dalton Castle. I've come to learn since that Dalton Castle's quote unquote best days are behind him because of a back injury. I did not know that had happened, but it was really cool to see Jonathan Gresham work. And then we got to see the most over man in AEW, Mr. Singh. I cannot quite remember his first name. Do you remember?
Ranjan Singh? That's the other
Satnam.
Satnam Singh.
Satnam Singh. Wasn't he a former Dallas Maverick?
Yes.
Go Mavs. We're up 3-2 on the Jazz.
Yes, sir.
Let's see what happens in 2 days because this will come back after. Kieran, did we win? Hi, yeah, the game's on Thursday, and I edit this on Wednesday, so I have no idea. Live in uncertainty, you stupid jackass. Goodbye. But anywho, it was a really fun ROH match, but again, a bit of a foregone conclusion. One thing that wasn't a foregone conclusion for me per se, and you think it would be, was the main event of Battle of the Belts, and I'm really glad that this match main evented. It deserved every bit of that spot. Thunder Rosa versus Nyla Rose. Justice, what did you think about this match going into it versus coming out of it?
Going into it, I expected it was probably going to be a really good match. I personally, both Kieran and I, we really like Nyla Rose and what she does with pro wrestling and just on Twitter because she's hilarious. And Thunder Rosa is an incredible wrestler and has been putting on bangers for AEW for quite a while. And she's been wrestling bangers outside of AEW for years as well. I was like, oh yeah, this is probably going to knock our socks off. And that was one of those situations where we happened to be right because Nyla Rose and Thunder Rosa proceed to have a pretty brutal and pretty stiff looking match. Kieran and I were kind of wondering was just like, how much time would they get? And they got plenty of time.
Just to kind of cover the last of the experience, the go home match on the dark segment was a 10-man tag. Talk about bodies in the ring. On one side, we had the Hardy Boys, Top Flight, and Frankie Kazarian versus Max Caster, Private Party, and Helico.
Yes.
And the fifth one escapes me. The Blade.
Was it the Blade? Yes, it was the Blade.
Blade.
Yes, it was the Blade.
This was just a popcorn match to send the kids home happy. And we got a segment with Danhausen doing the juke, because apparently that's the name of the Hardy Boys thing, and he looked geriatric. It was wonderful. So, piggybacking off of that discussion, I have been pretty lucky in the past, I'd say, 4 months as far as going to see wrestling events. It all started toward the middle of December, which was when I got to see Winter is Coming at the Curtis Culwell Center in Garland, which is AEW's North Texas spot. I hope that they can move out of that particular venue because I don't have any problem with it. Parking's really easy, but I'd like to see them fill bigger houses. I got to go to night 2 of WrestleMania, as we have previously discussed on this podcast, and we had just discussed on this particular episode, we both got to go see Rampage Battle of the Belts, which got me thinking, if I were able to have access to a magical hole in space and time and be able to plot myself at any point in wrestling history, what wrestling show would I go to? I know I have an answer, but Justice, do you have an answer?
This is a very this is a tricky question.
We might revisit this, so it's not the end-all be-all. I think it would be a fun context to delve around in for 30 minutes on multiple occasions.
When posed this question, I have an answer that's out of the box. I'm going to play with the parameters a little bit, if you'll indulge me. So, as far as...
Really quick, are you trying to loophole me, motherfucker?
I may be trying to loophole you right now. It's very filthy of me. How dare me, Sir Justice of Lawyers. So...
That's my one F word, by the way.
So, as far as shows I wish I could have attended, I don't remember the exact date, but the show that I would like to have been to, but no one was able to go to, would have been the AEW episode that was the debut for Brody Lee. I would have loved to been there for that crowd to see that moment for Brody Lee. As
what crowd though?
That's the thing. That's where my loophole comes in, because no one was able to see that show. If that show was in person, if I have a magic box and I can time travel and all that stuff, if parameters are such where all this is possible, I would have loved to have been in a crowd show where there would have been a crowd for Brody Lee's debut in AEW. So for me, playing with the mechanics of the question a little bit, I would have loved to have been an audience member for that, but I wasn't, and there wasn't any. So in a what if universe, for me, that would have been the one to go to. I was one of the people that was, as much as wrestling fans can kind of be mad, there's bigger and more important things happening in the world, but as much as a wrestling fan could be mad, I was very much disappointed in how Brody Lee was handled towards the end of his WWE tenure. Big fan of that guy. I think he's a world-class worker. I was very much happy and looking forward to seeing him in AEW doing something important. And when we got to see that he was the leader of his own faction, that was just like icing on the cake, because he had been pretty much the side lieutenant in all the other, stuff that we had seen him in, especially in WWE. So he was leading his own faction, making a grand debut, making a statement that he was here in AEW, and things were going to be centered around Brody, and also Brody helping these other talents rise up in his own faction. To me, that seemed perfect. And so if there is a show that I wish I could have been to, it would have been that one. But unfortunately, like I said, no one was able to see that show aside from the wrestlers themselves and the production team.
Well, Justice, it's a fun dichotomy because you chose a show that had absolutely no pops whatsoever. Recently, I got a text message from my cousin Steven, who sometimes listens to the show. If you're listening right now, hi Steve, love you, finish your dissertation. He pointed out to me that we need to put more respect on the Attitude Era's name. Because he's about 4 years older than me, so Steve Austin's his guy. From a polished work rate guy's perspective, of course the Attitude Era isn't where you go to, but he's absolutely right. The Attitude Era was essentially the second coming of Beatlemania. LSD period of the Beatle era, if you will, if you want to compare the 80s to the bowl haircuts Ed Sullivan days. So the show I have chosen to go with is the January 4th edition of Monday Night Raw, otherwise known as the night that Mick Foley won his first WWE championship.
Excellent pick.
I thought I could do a thing where I would go down the card. It was episode 293. Again, it took place on January 4th, 1999. The opening match would be Steve Blackman versus Ken Shamrock. Steve Blackman would win that match. Again, it was an hour-long episode of Raw. That's another reason I'd want to go, because hour Raws sound so appetizing right now.
Oh my gosh, the days.
Particularly this past Monday, where we had less than 30 minutes on our wrestling show in a 3-hour wrestling show, and that was considered one of the best episodes. 30 minutes on an hour show? Cool. But any hooser, Steve Blackman defeats Ken Shamrock. I feel like that would have been a fun match to see live. Goldust defeats Mark Henry via disqualification. It's the Attitude Era. There's chicanery left and right. Same thing with the Godfather and Test that follows in a no contest. We have a beatdown angle with Triple H versus Mankind, but that, funny enough, like WrestleMania 30, where Triple H fought Daniel Bryan, it builds it up. Edge versus D'Lo Brown ends in a no contest. A 2-on-1 handicap match. Kane defeats the Corporation, and the representative of the Corporation were Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe. I would be there live in a second, my friend.
Oh my goodness.
The Stooges are very unfunny, but I have to at least be there for one. It's like the who was the group that was obsessed with ICP in the 90s? It was the Oddities after further studies.
The Oddities.
It would be that kind of car crash, and personally, I would have liked to wave my hands to ICP the same way we do Jungle Boy's theme song. And I hate ICP. But the cream of the crop, the moment that we come for that hour of Raw, the wrestling match between The Rock and Mankind. And again, it's Run-In City. There's everybody by ringside. Nobody's going to lose clean. But the pure moments in that match, because you don't truly know if Mankind's going to win this thing. The Rock, particularly in his tracksuit breast implant day, was a ruthless dude who rarely ever lost. In hindsight, you should know that there's going to be some chicanery and someone's going to lose that shouldn't because of all the people ringside. But this match, particularly the last 3 minutes of it, is a textbook course in how to build a wrestling pop. The Rock on top, momentarily, until Mick Foley comes back with Mr. Sacco. The crowd comes alive just a little bit. Well, not just a little bit, they come alive. They start to crescendo. But all of a sudden, one of the members of the Corporation comes over with a chair. Boo! They're so deflated. They're so defeated. But then Billy Gunn runs in the ring. He's come to protect Mankind. The crowd roars louder. And then it's an entire amalgamation of bodies between the Corporation and D-Generation X. And the crowd just continues to build and swell. When all of a sudden, the bringer of death, glass shatters. One of the biggest pops you've ever heard in your life, but not the biggest one, my friend. Steve Austin rolls down to the ring. He's walking, he's talking. I've watched this moment a million times. He grabs a chair. He pops Rock right in the head. I shouldn't like that because that leads to concussions, but it's part of the moment, damn it. And then 1, 2, 3, there's the biggest pop. The pop heard around the world. You cannot tell me, at least for a second, you would not want to be part of that just massive swell of joy. I am a pretty emotional dude. I cry at The Simpsons, but when you talk about wrestling moments, I rarely cry in wrestling moments. I maybe teared up a little bit when Triple H retired at the beginning of 38 Night 2. I can neither confirm nor deny that, but I genuinely well up when you hear that amalgamation of emotion and belief in one character. And to just be a part of an Attitude Era crowd for one night, again, it would be like being a part of Beatlemania Live, because that was the most successful period pro wrestling ever had.
So correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe this was one of the shows, I think one of the more prominent ones, that the folks over at WCW tried to sabotage by revealing the results for. Just like, oh, hey, yeah, Mick's going to win the title. And from what I understand, it backfired big time.
Oh, Mr. Schiavone, who is rightfully revered as an AEW announcer, got way too cocky and way too homery. And the exact vernacular of the thing was, that'll put butts in the seats. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 700,000 people switched over immediately to WWF Monday Night Raw in order to see Mick Foley win that title. And at that point, WCW never came back.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah, it's one of these moments that we've kind of heard about like throughout the history of wrestling, obviously given our age. And you can see it through the TV, but I can absolutely see how just being there in that moment, the electricity, as they say, the electricity would be obscene. I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So given that it is a 90s crowd, and I thought about this when we went to our AEW show, given that, there's really no cell phone use just wasn't really a thing back then. So my question to you would be, would you be one of those fans to just be like, just go there, just like free hands so you can just cheer and scream and yell and throw your fist in the air? Or, my friend, would you bring a sign?
Oh, if I'm in the Attitude Era, I'm just there to enjoy the show because that's just a drop in the bucket. Everybody's got signs. Everybody's got cameras. So I wouldn't necessarily try to invest my time in bringing a sign. I would just want to watch the entire thing.
Got you. Okay, excellent point. That, me too, honestly, but I can see the point of view of just being like, I'm here, I'm going to put up, if I was in a crowd at one of these events with one of these people, here's a perfect sign for this. I can see that point of view, but I'm with you. I'd probably just be free-handed just so I could just, put him up and cheer because it's actually a really brilliant moment, honestly. It's totally Attitude Era kind of booking with that match. And it also, when you brought it up, like the run-ins, oh, Billy Gunn's coming in, oh, Stone Cold's coming in. I was like, this is exactly how we used to play as action figures as a kid. Maybe it was just me, but I'm sure because of my programming by WWE, most of the matches I had, they were like big title matches with my action figures. Oh, I'd overbook the absolute mess out of those matches. They'd be the most extreme, like 7 layers of pop, 40-minute long matches. Just extreme, just overbooked, like action figures that don't nearly need to be there, but just because that to me seemed like, oh yeah, it must be a big moment because why else would you have like all these other superstars come in?
You ever have RVD and Dusty Rhodes run in for the same guy? Right here, my friend. And to kind of circle the point back around, we need to remember not to take this for granted because it was stolen from us for over a year. Live professional wrestling is probably the most fun you can have under a roof, sans like a Super Bowl or maybe a finals game or a Laker game. I've never been to a Laker game, but Adam McKay makes them look really fun.
It's a real different energy.
Everybody's on the same page and everybody knows that this is really stupid, so let's have the best time of our lives. Well, ladies and gentlemen, did you like us? Did you hate us? Let me know either way. I'll fight with you on Twitter or I'll give you a hug in front of your mother. Check you later. Peace.